Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Through Thick and Thin for episode number 5. And I'm here today with my good friend, Paul Roysdon.
Yes, I'm excited. Thanks, Rachel, for having me on.
Yes, of course. Paul and I have known each other for a while now. We grew up in the same very small town, rural town, and went to high school together. But our relationship really blossomed when we went to college together in Philadelphia. So we have been really close since then, and I'm really excited to have him on the show today.
I know I've been waiting to come on here, and I'm excited that I'm lucky number 5. So I don't even know if five's lucky, but we're gonna roll with that and just say that it is.
It's gonna
So
be a lucky today.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yes. So even though Paul's from the East Coast, and that's where our relationship started, Paul now lives in LA, and he's a producer and has worked on several shows that everyone is probably very familiar with, like Love Is Blind, Vanderpump Rules, all the Housewives shows, several cities. So I'm really interested to get your input on how food and body image is different from like the East Coast to West Coast and LA within the entertainment industry. So I feel like there's a lot of good stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm like, how much time do we have on here? Because I
Yeah.
could go through it with you. So yes, lots to explore there for sure.
So before we get into that, like where you are now with your career, let's go back to the beginning. So can you give everybody like a brief history of what your relationship with food and your body has been
Oh yeah. Okay. So that's a loaded question. There's so many different, I feel like, elements to that, but I would say, growing up, for sure, we were like a fast food family. Like, I was like, that was like, and I now as an adult, I kind of associate like food as like enjoyment in a way. Like you kind of have a connection to it emotionally because I feel like when we were younger, it was like you just go and stop and get like a happy meal and like that can like make your day, right? But I would say personally for me that as I got older, like I would say as a kid, I didn't really think about my body until I got older, like teenager, and I was like in middle school. And then I felt like, people started going through like puberty and then you like start comparing yourself to them because you're like, oh, well, I don't look like that. Like, and then I think that's the age where like shit can kind of creep up on you where you're like, okay, I'm feeling like a love handle now. And it's probably because I just ate a whole bag of Doritos because no one's ever stopped me doing that before, right? So I always felt at that age like I wanted to start working out because I felt like that's what you have to do if you want like this ideal body, right? And then I would say I still didn't have a good, healthy understanding of it. Like I just felt like, you would deprive yourself or you would have to like, you know, kind of restrict what you're eating and, just kind of the very unhealthy way of doing it. So I was like following like Special K. I remember there was one era where I was like obsessed with Special K and I thought like you drink
like?
these drink packets and it craves your hunger. You have like the Special K bar and and like especially when my brother was sick, I felt like that's really where that unhealthy eating got even worse because I felt like at times I like felt guilty for even eating if he was sick, and that
Mm.
kind of made me have a very strained relationship with it too. Or, um, I would like pack my own lunches at home, and I would be like, oh, well, it has to just be like the most basic spinach with like the Purdue chicken, cut up, and then like some dressing on it, and like you don't even realize at the time that you're like, am I even hitting enough protein? And it doesn't have to be bland and boring to eat it and enjoy it. And like the dressing has a shit ton of calories in it and you think it's healthy. Um, so I would say that's probably the beginning of it where I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm learning as I go, but I know now as I'm working more actively towards it that it was not a healthy way of going about it growing up for
Hmm.
sure.
For some of the viewers or listeners who don't know, I think it's interesting how you mentioned how your brother being sick affected your relationship with food. Can you kind of go a little bit more into that and what was going on with your brother at the time?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so my brother was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was 12 and I was 16. And I feel like stress-wise, I probably put on weight because I was just stressed and, you're at the hospital all day or you're going to like appointments and you're doing things and you're kind of just like, oh, well, I'm on the go. I'm going to eat like fast food or something. So I think that was a way of not incorporating really like healthy foods, but I think there was also times where like, if he was sick and he was going through like treatment, I would feel guilty for like enjoying a meal because I always, like I was saying earlier, associated food with like emotion. So to me, like
Mm.
even as a grown adult now, like I like sitting in front of the TV and kind of like this sounds bad, but it's like not gorging myself, but I like having like a full meal. I love having like a Diet
Like an
Coke or like a
experience.
Coke. Yeah, yes, I totally make it an experience where I'm like, this is what I'm looking forward to. I like food. I want to enjoy it. I want to watch my favorite TV show. And I think back then I would feel guilty for enjoying a meal because I felt like, well, if he can't enjoy it, then why am I enjoying it? Because food is
Mm.
enjoyment, which I think like opens up another question that I think like as I've gotten older, I've been like, well, is food just supposed to be like nurturing for your body, or are you actually supposed to be like enjoying it, right? Um, so yeah, I would think that was definitely like a period where I felt like I probably picked up like bad habits and was just kind of just eating on emotion too, which also, like I was saying, that can be almost as detrimental as other different fads of dieting where you're just eating off of impulse because you're like, oh, I need something to make me feel better, so I'm just going to keep eating and gorging myself.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of what you're saying, like there is such an emotional piece with food. It's not something we can separate. I mean, yes, like food is fuel, and we want to think of like food as nurturing our body, and also we have so many emotional, sentimental pieces along with food, like culturally, with nostalgic memories, like you're saying, that you create a whole experience, with people's holidays or traditions. Like a lot of that is centered around food, and it causes happiness and feelings and all these different things. So it is hard to separate the two. And when you're going through a trauma that you and your family were going through, a lot of the times when I work with clients with eating disorders, you'll see normally a trauma is the root of an eating disorder, especially a trauma. Well, I mean, all trauma, right, is normally out of our control. And food and exercise is something that is so tangible to control. That's normally where people end up putting their energy when there's circumstances in their life that are out of their control and they are having a hard time coping with. So, I was curious, like, if that was correlated to what you mentioned, like the stress and how that affected your body physically.
Like,
Yeah, that
you look
but
just,
yeah.
but how I feel back to your question of what you were just saying, I said I'm thinking more as we're talking about this. I was like, I really view food as like a reward, right? Like you're like, oh, like to me, I'm like, I work all day, I go to the gym, and it's like I want that piece of like that good, enjoyable meal. Like it's got to be like yummy, like it's got to have all the things that I want with it, like and it makes me feel good. And that's where I say now as an adult, I know that there's like an emotional attachment to food, which I'm sure a lot of people feel that way maybe to some degree. Like, it's like you look forward to it like I know that's like my 10-15 minutes where I'm eating this meal that I want and I'm watching this TV show that I've been wanting to watch. I'm drinking my Diet Coke or Coke Zero that I've been craving all day. Like that's how I look forward to it. Like I really do. Like, and I think I still struggle with like which we'll probably go into this more, but struggling about planning out what you're going to eat, which I know me and you have talked about a lot about where your day starts to become revolving around food. So I think my it's definitely ebbs and flowed with me. Like it was like eating too little, thinking that that's how you lose weight because you restrict your calories, but then you crash and burn so quickly because that's not sustainable. And then I think you then maybe get into a mindset where you start to be like, okay, I need to incorporate more greens or proteins, but then you're thinking that you just have to eat so like basic because that's all it is. Where really, if you
Yeah.
learned how to cook and do some solid recipes, it probably would actually taste good. And then I think I went through a phase now where it was like I'm still trying to work on where it's like the macro counting and like clocking everything you eat. Where like I get anxiety now about like all these work dinners I have to go to where I'm like, how am I going to go out? Like, how am I going to be able to stick to what I'm doing and stay consistent and be on top of it when I don't know what's being put in this food, what the ingredients are, what everything that encompasses that. So I think now I'm on that like teeter where I'm trying to find balance between like being consistent with good quality foods, but then like being able to have that room where I can live because
Yeah.
I mean, I've been over your house where we've talked about it, where your mom was like
Mm-hmm.
making separate meals for you,
Yeah.
because you're clocking your macros. But I'm like, and really, which is crazy, is like, I saw how quickly like your results were from macro counting, and it was great because it was like, you look the best, quote unquote, because looking the best is very subjective, but it doesn't feel sustainable because then you're like missing out on these big events and doing things with people because you're like scared to indulge. Like I would go to a restaurant with my friends and I would drink Diet Cokes. I wouldn't drink alcohol, have a cocktail. I wouldn't eat anything. I would go there just because I felt like I had to go there because then I would like lose my friends if I didn't. But then I was like, well, I'm getting stressed out because I don't know what's in the food and how can I clock this? So I literally would eat like maybe a couple of chips just in front of them so it didn't look like I was crazy. And I literally, shit you not, would go on, I don't know if I can curse, but go on the fucking
Yeah.
MyFitnessPal app and I'm clocking in 3 tortilla chips because I'm like, oh my God, like, because I need to make sure that, there are carbs. I have to
Yeah.
incorporate that. And I'm like, this is
I
so toxic.
I will say, like I'm not I try not to be judgmental because, everybody has their own way that works for them, right? But I'm just very open about my journey with macros and like what did and didn't work for me. And it's interesting, like what you're sharing, because, you know, kind of similar when I was talking with Ryan, like you were even, I knew you prior to that relationship and like probably we were really, talking frequently when I was like in the deep of it, like during
Oh, I was
COVID.
like, girl, I was like, she's got it going on. She's got this 6 pack. Like, how do I get that? Because then I'm out here, like, around COVID, I remember being at your tool, and I was like, I just can't get rid of this. I can't get rid of like this little, like, I wanted to have that shredded look, right? Because I'm like, that's what everybody wants. It's what you see in movies, and it's glorified, and that's like the perfect body. So yes, I was like, whatever she's doing, I need to do it times two. So
And like, so I mean, I just want to highlight my, you know, macros. I think for some people, like works a lot, and kind of like in the other episode, Allie was saying, it helps her eat enough food, right? And it keeps people accountable that way. But for a lot of people who are more type A, have higher anxiety, potentially driven towards OCD, kind of like what I'm hearing from you and what we've discussed in from my own personal experiences, it became obsessive and it became
oh,
addiction for
100%.
me. Where now, like, that's literally all I was thinking about, and the amount of time and energy that was just solely focused on what am I eating? Let me check my fitness pal, and the amount of
Hmm.
anxiety around, oh my goodness, there's these social plans and like these things that are supposed to be great opportunities and experiences. And I just was not in the moment on vacations or out with friends or family. And for me, that was probably the breaking point with macros. And I was just thinking about this probably recently because there's just a lot going on. Like I'm chatting with you, like my wedding is like less than 2 months. So there's been a lot of events around
Changes.
food.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I would have lost it probably like 2 years ago because I'm eating out like several nights in a row.
Hmm.
And like, am I thrilled about it now? No, but like I am not really anxious. I maybe have a thought of like, oh, you're eating out like 3 or 4 days this week, and then that's it. And I think that's a combination of me, my recovery, me really working on that, me not counting macros for a while, and honestly, like my medication really helped.
Yeah.
turn off those obsessive thoughts for me. But that's kind of where I see it get really like a slippery slope for people with it.
100%. I mean, I would be lying to you if I was sitting here right now saying, I'm not going to go to my phone and clock what I'm going to eat today. I'm trying to break that and I'm trying to be better and I'm trying to just like, learn the technique, even like the hands, like, it should be like a fist. And don't quote me on this because I know it's incorrect, but like, a fistful of like carbs and a palm full of protein or something like that. But it's really hard to do that when you're like, I want a fucking burrito because you're like, well, where's the fist of protein? Where's the like that's not it. You know what I mean? So I think I still am tapped into that, but I'm trying to get out of it. And like, yesterday it was like a Saturday, me and Jordan, who was my boyfriend, to anybody who's listening to this, we're like, we were gonna go to dinner and I was like, oh, I should just go home and just be strict about what I'm eating and follow the numbers that I'm on. And I was like, but I want to go out and I want to have a cocktail at dinner and I want to have a meal. I just want to sit there and be at a nice restaurant and like enjoy that. And I caught myself having to be like, no, I need to talk myself out of this guilt that I know I'm going to feel afterwards because I constantly feel that way after I eat badly because and to anybody who's listening to this, I feel like I need to like say when I quote something because I'm like, it's not bad, but I was like, I feel badly about eating it because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have an apple pie afterwards because we're gonna split it, or I'm gonna have some like garlic bread, and I'm like, well, now the whole day's screwed, right? I'm like, I just completely went off my numbers, and now I'm like, oh, so that's where the spiraling starts to begin. But then I'm trying to like teach myself, I'm like, look, it's one day, and if you're consistent, and you shouldn't even think like that either. Like, I just wish I could just pull up to a restaurant and I'm like, if I want a garlic bread, like I want it and I'm not going to feel badly about it. And I think that's like a journey. And I feel like I cannot sit there and say right now that I'm at the end of it. I think it's going to be a long time battle as many people like you experience that similar feeling. But yeah, I think the guilt with it is like the worst feeling because it makes you feel like you're doing something bad and you're just eating food, but it doesn't fit into that your numbers or your restrictions or what your goals are at the time. So yeah, but me, Rach, I'm like, I'm such an extremist. I'm like, I go like I'm trying to I just went to this crystal manifestation class and the person who was demonstrating the class and was leading the class, she gave me these like 2 crystals as I was leaving after I talked to her, and she's like, I think you need 2 of them. And I was like, it was crazy because she felt it and she's like, these need balance because I think you need balance in your life. And I was like, girl, I was like, do you know who you're talking to? I'm like, it's like all in or nothing with me, right? Like, it's like the macros, I'm following it to a T. I'm in there. I'm like 148, standing at 5'8". I'm like shredded and look so good to what I think I look good. But I'm like, I'm living like it's miserable to constantly do that, right? So then now I'm like, okay, I'm 31. I'm sitting at 178, probably now at 5'8". And I'm like, I like this, but I want to be able to like have that room to eat and go out and enjoy things and not be like to my friends sitting in the corner drinking a Diet Coke with like that's just it's so miserable and it's so life sucking. So I'm at this stage in my life where I'm trying to find the balance between how do you live and then how do you still hold yourself accountable to your fitness goals at the same time.
And it's funny you mentioned balance because in my therapy sessions with clients, that's probably one of the topics that comes up the most because so many people have like the distorted like, thought process and cognitive distortions of all or nothing thinking. And I'm like, we just need balance, like not saying, and I think that's the bad rap with intuitive eating. People think it's like more so when people binge and you can eat whatever you want. And like, that's not the point. The point is to come to balance. Like, if you want the burrito and the cocktail, great. But like, your body is probably not going to crave that every day. Like, your body is
No.
going to want food that has like a lot of nutrients and fiber and like makes you feel good. But you're also not always going to have that available or, whatever it is. Like life isn't one way or the other. And that's what I
No.
think, we have to be flexible and adapt to that. And I think it's really hard with the structure of macros sometimes, depending on what your goals are, right? Especially if
Yeah.
it is like caloric deficit and you're trying to cut or maintain and all these things. And, like you're saying with the shame and guilt, and that was like the biggest piece. Just mentally, I couldn't sustain that. And that's where it got to the point where like this is not good for my mental health and I needed
No.
to take a step back from it.
100%. I'm like the fact that I feel this feeling all of a sudden where I'll be like, oh my gosh, like where is this coming from? And I'm like, I'm creating my own distress by just figuring out what I'm going to eat, if I'm not going to drink tonight, if I'm not going to participate in like going out to dinner because I'm like, oh, well, I just ate out yesterday, so I can't do it again because that was my quote unquote cheat day. And you also, I always think of you with this because I'm like, you kind of shit like to me about like the toxic correlation to like being like you have to have a cheat day where it's like you're telling yourself that like you're doing something bad by calling it a cheat day, like you're breaking this routine that's so
Mm-hmm.
bad that you have to call it something and give it that name. Where that's where I'm like, I don't even like saying the word cheat day anymore because I'm trying to reframe my mind of like, no, I just wanted this and I just wanted to have it. I deserve to have it because I'm human and I have a craving and there's nothing wrong with that. So I
Good.
think that's like
That's great.
that. Yes, I know you'd be proud of me of that, right? Um, but I said that's where I'm trying to make those subtle, like, I don't know, maybe it's a big change, but I see it as just slowly getting to the place that I want to be by making those little changes, even just reframing my mind of how I view things and my perspective on it.
Yeah. And I mean, day to day, those changes may feel small, but when you look back 6 months, a year from now, like those changes do add up.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, I don't know, I always think about it, me, I'm like always thinking 10 steps ahead. So, but I always think like, will I ever be where I want to be? And I do feel like as you get older and you put in the work along the way, you do find more insight and you become enlightened in a different way. We're like having these conversations and we chat about it. I'm like, oh, great. I'm not the only one that feels this way. Like, what are some tips that work for you? Like, oh, these are some tips that help me. Like, how can we do this together? Because, like I was saying to you earlier in the conversation, I think food was always brought, implemented in my house, like a fast food meal or like takeout. It was like a reward. Like, it was like, how much can I eat of this? Because it's all in front of me right now. And like, when's the next, like, and it wasn't even then, when's the next time I'm going to get it? Because I guarantee you, if I said to my mom, like, hey, I want another Happy Meal, my mom would just be like, oh, you're the best son, so I'm going to give you a Happy Meal, right? But like, I always view it even now, like the way how quickly I eat too is unhealthy. Like there's times where I'm like slow, like doesn't even take 20 minutes until your body digests what you even have to feel full. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like this scarcity mindset for some reason. I don't know where that comes from, where I'm like, I want chocolate chip cookies. I don't eat them every day. So I'm going to just eat six
Hmm.
of them in a row because they're in front of me and I want them now. And I'm going to say, fuck it, it's a cheat day. So I can just keep going because why not? Let's just keep it coming in. Let's have a couple more cocktails. Let's have some like, and that's bad. That's where I really have tried to draw the line in the sand where I'm like, no, no, no. Like last night I had 2 drinks, had somewhat of an okay dinner. It was like a club sandwich, some French fries, had an apple pie, and I'm like, okay, cool. Go home and that's it. Like I don't need to just go in the freezer and then start grabbing chocolate chips and cooking cookies and shit because I'm like, that's where I go because I think the day's already ruined now, so keep it going. And that's like where I'm being like, no, I gotta stop that.
And, that's really common, especially like I hear that a lot with the people I work with. And, um, it's like a cheat day mentality. Like, one, yeah, you're associating like good and bad with food. And two, it's pretty much an organized binge. Like, you're scheduling a binge in your calendar. And
A
the
hundred
thing when,
percent.
like you go off your macros or whatever, and people like, yeah, say fuck it, and like the day's already scrapped, that's where when you do eat food that is one, like not planned, like let's say you have an in service at work or, you know, Jordy brings home something or whatever it is,
Oh, there will be
it,
times where I literally am like, I can't even do it because it will throw my whole day off.
yeah. And I mean, I think that takes time. Like, it took a long time for me to like be able to just, if I want it, if I genuinely want it, I'll eat it and then like allow myself to move on and like still, go about my day versus like the shame spiral or like going off the rails and binging. But I think what helped me personally was like allowing myself, like truly telling myself, like allowing myself that food whenever I wanted it. Like sweets
Hmm.
and ice cream was a huge thing for me that I would only organize for like one day on weekends. And now, if I want ice cream every night, like there is ice cream accessible in my freezer at all times. Do I still love ice cream? Yes. Do I eat it multiple days a week? Yes. But I never eat as much as I used to in one sitting
Exactly.
when I didn't allow myself to have it regularly. And I feel like that is what was a huge transition for me.
Well, because it's kind of like counterproductive because it's like you literally are telling yourself deprive, 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 and then it's like let loose. Where like you could, in a healthy way, incorporate that, where you could have a couple spoonfuls that really just hit the spot, just gets away that craving that you really want, and like you're not eating to the point where you're like, I feel disgusting. Why did I do that? And then you put it back in the freezer, and then like you said, Tuesday night, you're like, you and Ryan are on the couch, you're like, hey, I want a couple more spoonfuls. Like, why not? And then instead of doing all of that where you eat a whole carton on a Saturday and then you're still eating other foods, I think that's where I had to like associate that because I'd be so restricted with my numbers, especially when I was in a deficit and I was the skinniest that I was. I was doing that where I was like, no, 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 everything's to a T during the week. And then there's that one day where I'm like, oh, bitch, I'm going off today. Like, whatever I want, like, we're going to Taco Bell, McDonald's, like, and I'm like, this is disgusting because it's like now I'm just doing it because I feel like I'm like
You
spiteful of
don't
like,
need
what?
to.
Well, because I'm like, I didn't get to do it 6 other days. So guess what? Today we're going out with a bang, you know? So, yeah, it's just interesting because I said even as a kid, there was always things that I felt like that just didn't like you don't know how to express those things, but I have, and I think everybody that I mean, majority of people that I know, like you said, kind of taught me, there's some form of whether it's not necessarily an eating disorder, but disordered eating, where we don't have a healthy relationship with it, and I totally think that because like as a kid, I could eat a bag of, I'll never forget this. I ate a whole bag of Cool Ranch Doritos as a kid. Whole bag. We used to get chips all the time in my house, and that was like my favorite. I remember I got so sick one day that I felt like it took me years to look at a Cool Ranch Doritos bag again to be like, I could have one of them. But I think even at that time, I wasn't realizing it, but I was creating that pattern of like binge, binge, binge. And like, I don't think your parents in that moment know to anybody who was
Sure.
growing up and having that to sit there and say like, they're like, oh, you're a kid, your metabolism's like that. I'm still like a toothpick and I'm like, I can eat whatever. But then it crept up on me when I was saying in middle school, where then I started seeing like the guys that I was going to school with and they were all playing sports and they're all like brawny and getting muscles and shit. And then I'm like, still kind of, I hate this word because I don't like even using the word fat, but I felt like I was in that like quote unquote skinny fat where it's like, I'm not really working out the way that I should. I have all this excess weight coming on my midsection and I'm like, that's all because I'm just not eating correctly for my body. I'm not giving it the correct nutrients to do that. So obviously at that age I wish I knew what I know now, but a work in progress, right?
And I'm curious too because you mentioned a lot of these, like the shifts with your relationship with food, or at least the awareness of it as a teenager, and
Yeah.
not only puberty with the changes of your body metabolism, but I'm also curious your personal journey and being a part of like the LGBTQ community, and
Oh
if
yeah.
like that you feel like has contributed to your relationship with your body and food at all.
Totally. I think it was different when I lived in Philly. I don't think because that was probably the biggest that I got when we were in college together because it was like I was recently out, like within that year that I went to school, when we went to Temple, and then I felt like I turned 21. So then it's like, we're going out to like 4 a.m. We're going to Darling's Diner, and you might have been there with me at one point. And I'm like, I'm eating like chicken fingers at 4 a.m. and then going to bed and, sleeping the next day like that and, not moving my body. But then I said in Philly, I didn't really feel that way necessarily because I didn't really have like a gay community around me there. So it was just kind of like that college mentality where you're just going out with everybody and it's whatever. And then I felt like when I came to LA, obviously living in West Hollywood, it opens up a whole door of like this mecca of like this gay world. And then, you're out here and they had like the dancers. I mean, hello, you've seen a couple of them on the poles doing their things out here in West Hollywood. So, and they're shredded. They're like the
Yeah.
depiction and poster child of like what, I ideally as society we have coined like what a perfect body looks like, right? And I think, then getting like attention from, people and you start living out here, I think it kind of then warps your brain of like, oh, like I'm actually like good, but then it's like kind of like an extreme because you're around all these people who are like actors, models, influencers, and fitness people. And sometimes their jobs are to look like that. And like my job is not to look like that. I work in like TV. So like I could look however I want to, right? But I think that also kind of starts tripping you out because you're like comparing yourself to these people who spend all day in the gym because that's their life and that's what they look forward to, which not shading anybody, but that's probably not healthy either to spend all day in the gym either.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being gay in West Hollywood and already having that unhealthy relationship, it just makes things like where now I even have to check myself where I'm like, I don't care, that's not who I am. So it doesn't matter. Like, what's my journey? Like, I'm not here
Yeah.
to, be a fitness guru on Instagram. I'm here to like just live a healthy lifestyle for myself. But definitely for sure, like you're seeing all the gays and the speedos at the pool parties, and I'm like, there's times even too, like where I've gone to the beach with my friends. I'm like, I don't want to take my shirt off right now because I'm like, I feel like I look like shit. Like, I don't feel like I'm at. It's kind of like a perfectionism, that you have to like meet. And I think for somebody like me too, who, me, feels very hard on themselves when they don't feel like they meet up to their
Yeah.
expectations and is very much a perfectionist. I think that also bleeds into how I look and put out how I feel physically, So I definitely think it all kind of coincides and ties together.
Yeah. And, statistically, and this is like reported, right? But statistically, uh, straight women and gay men are at the highest risk for an eating disorder, or the highest statistically of who have reported those populations who have eating disorders. And I think what you're saying too, I mean, you're in like the heart of it in West Hollywood and
Mm-hmm.
LA and kind of the stereotypes of LA with the health food stores and the
Oh,
juices and people always exercising and the
yeah.
weather. It's very much like in your face. If you're not a part of
Totally.
that, I could see how
But I've seen
outcast it.
I've seen so many people where I've been at events where, I mean, if you're going to a gay event, like I'm like, girl, there ain't gonna be any food there because no one's gonna be good eating it. Like, because no who's gonna be in their speedos sitting there going ham on
Like,
like, the spinach artichoke dip. Like nobody's doing that. So I'm like, it's very different when I've been in certain events though, because I've seen gay people that I run in circles with where I know for a fact that like they're like, oh, well, I had this pool party that I had to go to and I didn't eat all day. So then they go show up at the place that I'm at that's maybe around all walks of life, straight people, gay people, where it's not just a gay event and they're going in, like they're making up for not eating all day
yeah.
in that moment. And that's 100% because I think of the climate, the people, and I think the expectations just in society. Yeah, I mean, like you said, statistically, it is accurate that gay people definitely have a unhealthy relationship with food and body, dysmorphia and how they view themselves.
I mean, this will get me on my soapbox, so like I really don't need to go there. But there's all these studies and like feminist research about how diet culture is like a patriarchal standard, and
Uh-huh.
how gay men like fall into that patriarchy as well of uh, like objectifying one's body, that women deal with and then gay men deal with as well. And, you know, that's a whole other thing of like the shame and like I have to look a certain way and the standards are higher versus like I said, like that's like a whole nother episode you can do. But I do
Oh,
think those
sure. Yeah.
factors are like so deeply rooted where like people don't even realize why they feel like they need to present themselves as fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, you've been out to, like, remember Flaming Saddles was that cowboy gay bar that's not out, it's not here anymore, but you've been there with
Yeah.
me, and
All right.
some, some good times, right? And I mean, you've seen the culture of like how it is, and I'm like, look, if you look more like a quote unquote movie star, or like you have that like picture perfect body, you're gonna bring in more money. And like that's what it is. The better your body looks, the more money you're gonna make in. So all these like go-go dancers and just dancers in general that are out in WeHo, like I can only imagine what their day looks like. It probably revolves around heavily all day about what they're eating and when they're working out, and that's it. And I know people who don't even drink just because of you know, gay men who don't drink because of what it does to your body, of like the extra calories,
Mhm.
but they're partaking in other activities. So it's like
Sure.
you're not doing it because it's
For
like
health
more bad.
reasons, yeah.
No, you're doing it based off of just how you're presenting what you want to look like.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, okay, where's the line here? Like, where are we really drawing the line in the sand of saying, why are we doing this and what is this for?
Yeah, and I think, I'm all about like intention, right? And like what's the intention behind this? And I think that too, that has really helped me with my journey of healing because it's like helping distinguish emotional eating. Like, what is my intention with eating this meal? Is it to celebrate? Is it to enjoy time with family? Is it to literally just fuel my body in that moment? And I think if I take a moment of pause and be like, oh, I actually like don't really want this right now. I'm feeling, you know, stressed or bored or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is. Um, but anyway, I do, and I think just the intention behind so many choices that people don't bring any awareness to.
No, 100%. I mean, I think like we were saying earlier, the whole quote unquote cheat day, it's like we're already setting up in our mind that's like a rite of passage to just be like, that's it, I'm going in and doing whatever. And like to your point where you're saying like, am I bored or am I like, there's times where, me and Jordy's families will get together and we're in Vegas, and obviously there's a lot of like food and,
But so
drinks.
fun, right? It
Yes,
should
but
be.
then I'm like,
Yeah.
and I wish I could sit there and say I go in and I'm just like, guess what? It is what it is. I'm gonna make the best of it. That was another thing too. I caught myself like, my mom and Brett, my brother and myself, who were all just like, I look gross. I don't feel, oh my gosh, I wish I did. And I'm like, no, no, no. We just gotta like, then, we gotta be conscious about what we're doing in some way. Then it's like, do we really need the extra piece of cake if we just devoured a whole one? No, it's just because it's out and it's in front of us and we're just picking at it. And I don't think you should deprive yourself, but then I also think there's that healthy line of saying like,
There's a
do
line.
I really need this right now, right? Like I think the worst thing, like Jordy's parents, their house is like, oh my gosh, if you go in there, there's any snack that you want, it is there and it's all out too. And my mom used to do this too, and I told her she needed to stop doing it because it was just like buying things that is just making you more stressed out. Because when people bitch about like, oh, I'm not losing weight, like I just I do everything, but then you go into their house and there's like a loaf of like sourdough bread and muffins and donuts and M&Ms and it's just all out there. It's like, well, you don't even realize that you're like snacking on those things all day because they're out in front of you. And that's to your point where you're saying like you're bored, you're just going for it because it's just out there. And I think that's great. Moderation is key, right? Like if you want a couple M&Ms a night, like you said, the ice cream in the freezer, have at it. But I think when it's you're bringing those things in your home and you're incorporating them, and it's like constantly in your face. Like when we go there to his parents' house, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to pull back because I could just keep going at the peanut butter pretzels and the ice cream and the fruit, like, so I do think like you have to also put that in perspective, like have what you want to a healthy amount that makes you
Hmm.
feel good, but then when you start feeling like you're just doing it because it's out in front of you, that's why it's like, okay, tap out, like this is enough.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you're still at the point in your journey, it sounds like, where you're have like metaphorically like the angel and devil,
Oh
like that
yeah.
conflict where I totally get that. I still have those moments, but I think with over time too, that does start to fade. And like you were saying, the amount of energy and thoughts that are surrounded by food, like it slowly dissipates. I mean, it's a very long process. It's taken a few years now to get
Yeah.
to that point. And there's still good days and bad days, right? But I mean, I think a huge turning point for me was one, acknowledging like my personality, which is very similar to yours, where we're very hard on ourselves, we're very much hold ourselves to a
Hmm.
high standard, and
Who,
kind of type
you?
A. Yes,
Yeah.
right. People don't think so, but I am a perfectionist with myself.
You very much
Um,
are. We
and
have very similar
yeah,
qualities that we have with one another, that
and
we live very different lives, but our moral compass is very, very similar.
yeah, which is great, right, for a lot of things. But then that's also kind of leads me down that path
Hmm.
and of where I struggled with my body image, food, and for me, I know it'll never be good enough. Like there will
Hmm.
always be something about my body where I'm like, even at that, most in shape, I say that in air quotes, right? Where you saw me back in COVID, there were still parts of my body where I was like, see, if I could just, tweak
Hmm.
this and do that, and I know it'll never be good enough. So one,
Hmm.
I know that, and two, someone asking this question was really kind of shifted my perspective. If you stayed at the weight, or like if you looked exactly like you do now for the rest of your life, would you be okay with that? And I got to a point where I was kind of like, you know what? Probably. Like, what will I ever be truly 100% satisfied? No. But even if I was doing like on the macro count, I the 2 day workouts, miserable, I would still
Hmm.
not be 100% happy. So maybe giving myself some leniency and saying, I'm not that bad for allowing myself to do all these things. And that is means so much more to me than my appearance at the time. If I had to compare, like that was a
Totally.
really big mindset shift for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like when you were just saying that, I caught myself like not being present for a moment, thinking, would I actually really be happy with this body, for the rest of my life? And I think that's a hard question, because like what you're saying, I think I'm kind of my journey with this, I feel like I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, and I don't think it's going to be an overnight fix, and I think it's going to be actively, like in my head, I envision with what I think I should look like, and if I'm not there yet, then I feel like that's failure, and that's a very unhealthy way to look at where you're saying, like, if you just say like, we look good, you're moving your body, you're working out, you're taking care of yourself, you are conscious of what you're doing for the most part, and most self-aware, that should be enough, right? But I'm like, I struggle with that part of being like, doesn't feel still like enough. It feels like it has to be better than what it was before, or what it currently is. And I think that plays into the perfectionism thing. And then I think even what takes this conversation into a whole nother level is like the self-worth component of it too, of like being like, I'm good just how I am. Like, who am I competing with? And
Mhm.
I always think too, people would always say, like, when me and Jordy started dating, well, you have a boyfriend, like, who cares? Like, who cares what you look like? And I'm like, no, but I do, because it's not about how my significant other, views me, or thinks of me. It's about how I view myself and how I feel about myself. Because at the end of the day, he could think I'm the baddest bitch in the world and I got it going on. But if I don't believe
Sure.
that, and I don't feel that, then I'm like, it's just gonna be this vicious merry-go-round where I'm never gonna get off of it, right? So Yeah, I think that's also like a strong component is like what are you doing it for and who is it for?
And, like, that comes up a lot too, like, I stay this way for the rest of my life, like, coming back to that, almost like end all be all question. And, relationships come up a lot because a lot of people think that people change their body to be desirable, but even going back to what I was saying before of, like, the objectifications of our body and how we feel like we need to perform and appear desirable, what has also really helped me is reminding myself that my self-worth is not based on my physical appearance. Yes, that is part of it, but that is such a minuscule piece of myself. And
Hmm.
there's like this quote, like my body is the least interesting thing about me, which I think, you know, um, me personally speaking as a woman, like that has always, I feel like, been what people first have always commented on
Well, of
versus,
course,
yeah,
because
like
it's
education, career,
yeah, I mean, look at
personality trait.
pop culture. I mean, that's like what it's out there, and I mean, people objectify people and make comments about it and stuff like that. And I even caught myself too. I think I said it too, where I was like, "Rach, you have the biggest butt," and like I said it in the most like positive way, right? But then like I had to take a minute and think like, "Oh, I hope that wasn't insulting," because like maybe that for you is like a sensitive topic, but I look at it or I'm like, "Oh no, like looks so good, like anybody would want this," but it's commenting on things that don't need to be commented on. I don't think you took it that way, but like I always remember that it was just like a learning lesson for me of like, you know, maybe that thing that you're saying is great or something, maybe is somebody's most insecure spot. Maybe it's just like,
Sure.
why are we talking about it?
Yeah, and
Um,
just commenting on people's bodies in general. Like, I did not, I believe, take that
no, I know.
personally,
You
but
really
like there are like people where it's like you don't know, right? Um what people
triggering
have
for
been
them.
through or what they're going.
Yeah.
Um
I've tried to just
and
stop saying anything in general. Like,
yeah.
instead of especially now with like those epic craze and stuff where you say to people like, oh, you look so skinny, skinny. I'm like, I don't, it feels icky to even say that. Like, I'm like, I don't like saying that. I just like being like,
Mhm.
you look good, like you look healthy, like you look great. Like, and to me, that could be skin, that could just be like a glow that you have, that could be an aura. That doesn't, to me, define just your body size and shape.
Yeah, and you discussed a few things on how you're starting to shift your mentality and work on yourself, and I'm curious so far. This is a long process and an ever-going journey, but what has been, like, the most beneficial for you so far, or what is something that has really stuck out to you that you recommend for someone else?
Yes, I've tried to tap into my own, I would say this is also aside from food, like my mental health journey of being like, I'm I'm a bad bitch, right? Like I'm like, I got it going on and I might not see it in the mirror, but I have to believe that to think that because if I
Mhm.
think that and I know that and I tap into that, then I'm like, I don't care what this other person's doing or what they look like because they're not Paul Roy said. I don't care what this person eats or what they do for their gym exercise because that's not my life. My life allots for me to maybe have a
Mhm.
2 hour window every day or an hour window, and I have to make the best of it because I'm on a different path than that person. So to me, it was very much like this is me. I'm not comparing myself to shit or somebody else because we all have different goals, and I don't know what these people are doing, right? Like, who knows? Like, are they doing steroids? Are they doing things that are not what I'm doing? So it's like I'm comparing myself to something that I don't even know. And then I hate to
Yeah.
say it, but then if you really get to know that person or know what they're like, maybe they're the most unhappiest person in the world. But the facade is that, well, they look great,
Mhm.
so who cares? But I'm like, I want to be a master at feeling great mentally and physically and not just choosing one. And I think there's a in between there where I think once you realize that, that's the strongest takeaway from it is like, what am I doing this for? Am I okay? Am I safe? Am I present? It's all those things that encompass that and just knowing like that you're good. I'm like, as long as I move my body every day, and for the most part, I'm eating whole foods and healthy foods, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like, there could be worse in the world, you know? So I would say my takeaway is long-winded, but I would say to just really understand yourself and your goals and who you are as a person. And once you're on your own path, it's not for anybody else to compare and contrast what the differences are.
And kind of piggybacking off of that too, if there's someone who, is looking to work on their relationship with food and their body, or they realize that their behaviors were disordered, but don't know what first steps to take, like, what would you recommend to them?
To have a Rachel Machowski in your life to be able to guide you and help you along the journey. No, seriously, having conversations because like I always love talking to you about all this stuff because I'm like, you're so knowledgeable, you have such great insight, you make people feel better about like myself included, of like, oh, like I don't need to feel so bad and feel so hung up on like this one like I had a brownie today and I'm like, oh my God, it's like, okay, like, you talk sense into people. So I think having that, and that's why you're great at what you're doing. And I so love that you're doing this and have a platform to talk to other people. But I think it's totally having conversations and, like you were the one that kind of opened up my eyes to it where I just thought I was just like another gay that just felt, I have like weird association with food and I just am like, we just want to all look this way. And then you were like, no, like, so many people have disordered eating and there's a difference between disordered eating, eating disorders, and a slew of other things that come with that. So I think just having, conversations with your friends and being like, yeah, like why aren't they like this? Like maybe it is me and not beat yourself down about that, but just be self-aware that you have that in the back of your head and be cognizant of like if they can do it, like I can do it. We're on two different journeys, but like if it's pulling me away from my own life and my enjoyment and my happy, then it's not worth what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I am such a huge advocate for like having a community or having positive supports, and because I feel like especially with eating disorders and body dysmorphia, it is such a lonely journey, and it since it is so shameful, a lot of these things you don't openly discuss. It's just that internal dialogue,
Mhm.
and once you vocalize those thoughts, like more times than not, I feel like you acknowledge how distorted they are once you say them, and then
Oh yeah.
normally whoever you're communicating with is it if they're like informed and they know where you're coming from. I wouldn't say any of this to someone who is like very much stuck in diet culture and could potentially be more triggering. But it's a positive like peer support is able to talk you down, or obviously like this is my plug for therapy, right? Like an unbiased professional who has some experience with like disordered eating or eating disorders where they can kind of like help you with that. But even like I know like we just like shot each other texts before when we're struggling, and just
Oh
having
yeah.
that like immediate support, or even if it's like a few hours window or whatever it is, where someone who they understand what you're going through, at least to some level, I feel like really takes the shame and loneliness away from this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's like you're like a safe space, and I think everybody should have somebody like that where they're like, I know I can go to them, and there's no judgment. They don't make you feel crazy for feeling that way. And you're like, hey, I feel similarly too. And I think most people, whether they weren't as outspoken like us about it, they would be lying if they said they don't feel the same way. They just don't speak openly about it, And I think taking away that shame and having conversations like that. I mean, I've been such a firm believer of that because it's like at the end of the day, someone can always walk away with more knowledge or insight, whether they have it personally. If not, then I'm sure there's somebody in their life that they have seen, them push their plate
Hmm.
around, or they've seen people binge and gorge and do things like that. So, I mean, it's very prevalent. And I mean, just statistically, somebody around you is going to have some type of, unhealthy relationship with food.
Yeah, for sure. And it is like such a taboo topic that I think, that's why I'm so grateful you came on today, and, all these people who come on and just take the time to talk about it. I think just disclosing and just naming what it is, it takes away like whatever shock factor there is to it, or hush hush.
Yeah. Well, that's why people need to keep tuning in and listening, because this is a brilliant idea and it's amazing. And I think, how many people do you know, like in your circle, that, are like you, or just so open and honest, that make people feel heard and safe and relatable? And I think that's like anything in the world, like mental health. Like, I mean, now we're having people talk about that and be so open. So I'm like, food should just be the same, because, like I said, everybody has some type of association or connection with it, good, bad, ugly. So, yeah, I'm like, this is great. And I'm like, I'm gonna leave here and eat my fucking burrito and not give a shit and just say, you know what, I'm gonna eat the burrito because I want it and I can
And you're
have
still a
it.
bad bitch with a
Yeah,
burrito.
exactly. And that's another thing too about what we were saying about self-worth, is that I read this book lately, 'cause, I'm all about like self-help books and tapping into like the better version of yourself. And it's like, when you already start your day off about being like, and I don't like using these words, and I'm just saying, but like, and I know they can be triggering, but like saying like, I'm fat or I'm
Mm-hmm.
ugly, or I'm like, you're already like setting that tone in your mind, instead of waking up and being like, yo, I look good today. Like, I look good. I feel good in my clothes. I like the way that I look. And I think that's so hard to just accept. And you don't need to accept it, but just take in who you are in the present moment, because I think everybody has that expectation of looking like this XYZ person. And even at to me, my most cut up that I was, it still sometimes was like, oh, I have a six pack. Well, this guy has an eight pack. And it's like, yo, just take like what it is for what it is. Like, just stop. Like, you look good, And I think that really is such a crucial component of this journey, is also the mental part of it, and the self-worth and the confidence, and just loving it for what it is.
Well, I think you're really the nail on the head with that one.
Thank you. That's a good way to go out, right? Get my burrito
Yeah,
and have a
bad bitch with a burrito.
yeah, I'm like that's my new hashtag now. That's how we're gonna promote this episode.
Yeah,
Bad bitch with a burrito.
I,
That's the episode 5 name. Put that.
I think I might. But thank you so much, Paul, for coming on, and I'm so glad you got to pretty much just record one of my long conversations.
I was gonna say, this to me was like, I knew I would talk overly about this topic. I could keep going on. It's like an hour now, and I'm like, girl, we could keep going. So yes, thank you for having me. I love you. I love this. I love what you're doing. We need more people like you in this world, and I'm excited to keep seeing where this goes and keep doing what you're doing. So, bring me on for part 2, and I'm there.
Thank you.
Of
And
course.
thank you, everybody, for tuning in or watching or however you're listening to this. Thank you for sticking around. And episode 6 will be released June 1st, the first of every month. So keep your eye out for that.